Hello, everybody. Hello, Al. Hello, Terry. Thank you for joining. We are here at the webinar, Navigating Software Supply Chain Risk and Trust from the CISO perspective. And thank you for everybody who made this time to join us. I have the honor to host today two great cyber leaders and thought leaders, Ghous and Terry O'Daniel. A short intro for all of us is, let's start with you, Al. Ghous is an experienced CISO, venture advisor, and investor. Al has been in the cybersecurity industry for over 20 years, contributing in different capacities, from product security and risk management to solution consulting and security architecture. Al's experience spans serving as Chief Information Security Officer at Snapdocs, Universe, and ServiceMax, as well as leadership positions at Informatica, Robert Half Kaiser, Permanent, PeopleSoft Oracle, and Ernst & Young. Al is active in the cybersecurity industry and is part of several industry organizations and consortiums. He is closely tied to the venture capital community as well as a member of several advisory boards. Hi, Al. Thank you for joining.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Terry. Hi, Terry. Terry O'Daniel is the head of security of Amplitude. His specialty is building lean security engineering teams to solve complex challenges at scale via automation and telemetry rather than compliance by spreadsheet. Before Amplitude, Terry built and led security teams at Instacart, Netflix, Salesforce, and Yahoo. He also worked in consulting to build security strategy, vCISO, and cyber risk quantification offerings for companies in highly regulated industries. In his spare time, Terry enjoys music, fencing, martial arts, and gaming with his kids. Me too. Hi, Terry. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much, Ruby, and good to see you.
Thank you. A few words about me and about Scribe. So I'm Ruby Arbel. I'm the CEO of Scribe Security. Scribe is a comprehensive attestation-based software supply chain security solution, providing transparency, control, and trust in software products and the software factory. Scribe's evidence-based security solution supports workflows for managing and sharing SBOMs, aka software bill of materials, and all other security aspects of the software across the organization. All right, let's just dive into our topic, and maybe let's start with how we got here, with some baseline of what happened, why is software supply chain security is so important now, why now, why not 10 years ago, what has changed from, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago that makes this an acute problem today. Maybe, Terry, would you like to take this one and start with this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's interesting when I speak with some of my colleagues about this, I realize that I'm talking in acronym soup, right? And I throw out SBOM and SALSA and SSDF, and I realize that a lot of folks haven't really come up to speed on what is changing in the industry, why now, as you said. And I would say, that one of the major drivers, for those who aren't aware, there was an executive order issued by the White House a couple of years ago that said we have a problem with critical infrastructure, and we have a problem with securing the supply chain of our software. And the way that it impacts us in the SaaS and the product world is we've been on the hook for a while to prove to our upstream customers and to absorb information from our downstream vendors, is the software we're providing to you really secure? How do I know? Does it have bugs? Does it have vulnerabilities, et cetera? And there's been this movement for a while to create SBOMs, which is a software bill of materials. And really all that says is you should have a list of provenance. That is, where did the pieces, the component parts of this software come from? How do I know that they were built correctly? And I think that's where, the SBOM is the ultimate driver, the ultimate artifact we want to be able to produce or consume if you're a purchaser. And there's two ways to really go about that. And that goes back to the acronym soup I was mentioning. So SALSA, which is an area I'm a little less familiar with, is one approach, but the one I'm more familiar with is SSDF, which is really the new NIST standard around how do we secure the software supply chain. This is just one of the add-ons to NIST 800, the NIST 800 series, like 853, and it really gives you a list of how to secure the supply chain, and it gives you how to do so across the build process, across your organizational process, et cetera. And then SALSA, which I'll touch on briefly, but maybe I'll pass over to Al, really gives you levels, right? It says the baseline is you have to prove that you've built good software, but then there's levels beyond that. And maybe I'll pass it over to you, Al. What do you think about sort of where this comes from and how it's impacting us today?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said resonates with me. I hear the same thing. I'll go even a little further though. When I talk about software supply chain security and thereof, the different levels from engineering all the way up to senior leadership, what I get back is, yeah, it's a good idea to vet, your vendors. We have questionnaires, right, for that. Well, they're confusing the traditional supply chain, vendor supply chain, supplier, right, supply chain versus software. And this is talking about SaaS companies. So I think there's still a lot of education that needs to happen out there. I think we jump right into standards and regulations without really doing a lot of education. And so I hope forums like this is really helpful for individuals. I've been in many webinars at different levels, high level and very technical, where people still don't understand what software supply chain is and what open source software risks there are. So, with that said, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but there obviously there's standards out there. There's, I guess you can call them regulations. We've done a really poor job as an industry, kind of self-regulating ourselves and educating ourselves. And so when breaches happen and they tend to impact, national security and so forth, then, the hammer comes down, and that's unfortunate. But I think we just need to do a better job of educating ourselves. And the acronym soup you mentioned doesn't really help. I think we need to get down to the roots of it and take more of an organic approach within our industry.
Interesting. So I would like to add my two cents for it. I think that the software supply chain has always been a problem, and it has always been a big problem. Okay, the thing is, it is now a much bigger problem, almost paradoxically, because the cyber defense mechanisms matured and became much better. So for an organization, for a serious organization that wanted to protect itself, it was hard to do it like 10 and 20 years ago. So for the attackers, it was really easy to attack their end target. And now it has been becoming in the last decade or so more and more difficult. So attackers looked around and searched for the easier targets to get to their final target. And the software supply chain is usually a better cost-effective way for an attacker to do it, because it's less mature companies with less defense mechanisms, maybe without a CISO, and it's just easier, and attackers like the easiest path. And I think that today it's just became a bigger problem, because it's just much easier to do it through the software supply chain rather than go head to head with banks and the large organizations that know how to protect themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I may add just real quick here, Ruby, you just reminded me, this has been a problem for a very long time. It's just that the risks were always there. It's just that it materialized with, a couple of the more recent breaches and incidents. But having said that, it was a really tough problem to solve. I want to give a little bit of context to the audience here. I tried to solve this a while ago, about 5.5 years ago. I was working for a very large conglomerate, serving critical infrastructure, government, manufacturing, automation, you name it, very large company, and or some of our more sensitive customers or prospects start asking about this integrity of your software. It was a SaaS platform. And, we looked around and we're like, okay, what do we do? Well, yeah, we do code signing, right? Let's go for it. And then we started to peel the layers and figure out what it takes to do code signing. And we're like, okay, we got to stand up a PKI infrastructure. We don't have that. Okay, let's go do that. And so it just went on and on and on. It was like a never ending, architecture exercise, whiteboard exercise that we just couldn't wrap our arm around. And, unfortunately I left the company, so I don't know exactly what happened, but this was a very tough problem and still is a tough problem to solve on your own. So I'm glad there's solutions out there that can help us.
Yeah, and I think you touched on the dark underbelly of what we have been doing, I think, Al, which is signing contracts and trusting to luck, right? And hoping that this paper protects us, hoping that the paper we asked our vendors to sign, we can trust them enough that if they say they can patch critical vulnerabilities within a certain time frame, well, I hope so. I hope that is really the case, but how would I know? How would I test? How would I actually validate for myself? And I think we didn't have anything collectively as an industry, and we've been reliant on foundational pieces like reviewing a SOC 2 or something like that. It's a start. It's certainly better than where we were 10 years ago when a SOC 2 wasn't a de facto requirement to do business. But how do I know? There's a lot of trust there, and I think for me, one of the easiest ways to describe this to people who aren't deep in the weeds here is everyone remembers Log4j, and everyone remembers if you worked inside a company that was a vendor, or if you had to assess your vendors, it was a scramble, right? There was no push one button, tell me if we're impacted by Log4j. It was people running around asking different teams, like, could you look at your architecture and find where we're using this or not? That's awful, and that's no way to run cybersecurity. And so I think the timing is perfect for those of us who have been pushing from the inside, and there hasn't really been that forcing function to enable us to get better. And sometimes that's what we need.
Yes, I totally resonate. I think it is a very hard problem. I think that the basis is that software supply chain is like the perfect Trojan horse because this is something you need in your organization. You open the gates, no matter how high are the walls that you've built. Now you need a software from the outside, so you need to open your gates and get it in, right? And the approach that the industry took in the last, let's say, 25 years is the approach of the traditional AppSec, so to say. So the aim or the goal was, I want to know what vulnerabilities I have in my code. But this is only part of the game, right? It's only part of the story. Understanding what vulnerabilities are in the code is very important to understand the potential attack surface. And many times the alleged attack surface is much bigger than it is because many vulnerabilities are not exploitable on a specific product, right? However, this was like the holy grail of organization. Just let me know what vulnerabilities do I have. But actually, for real software tampering, this will not help. So new approaches had to be developed. All right. So actually, the Log4j story is a good story to move on to this to personal elements that are also concerned about risk and trust, as you said, Terry. So it's interesting to hear how do you approach this problem space from your experience and your background. Like, how do you process this problem? How do you think about risk of your software supply chain, of your own development environment? What elements you want to manage? I mean, risk is very large, right? What is important to monitor and to measure in order to really understand the risks that you have? Who wants to take this?
I can jump in real quick, and really interested to see what Terry's thoughts are on this. But I think for the most part, the industry is more or less aligned in terms of where we need to start. And I go back to education. Even our engineering teams, they understand the impacts of open source software, but I don't think they understand the risk. And I distinguish between risk and impact. Impact meaning we rely on these very heavily, and if we don't use it, our product will not work. So they get that part. What they don't get is there's risk associated with that. And so that's our job as practitioners, to be able to educate them and build that culture internally. And that's a slow process. So the culture has to be there, the training and awareness has to be there. And then you get into, okay, let's figure out how to address this problem in a more holistic way versus just throwing technology at it. From that perspective, it's a matter of really trying to also help them in terms of, yes, we're going to come across CVEs, we're going to come across things, but we can't have the expectation that they're going to go fix everything. I think it's incumbent on us to be able to help them prioritize better with the necessary tools, necessary process, procedures, agreements in place between engineering, security, and product. A lot of times we forget product management. They set the tone, they set the agenda, they set the timelines. They're responsible for the releases at the end. And if you don't work with them, engineers will just say, I'm sorry, I have so many things to do, and in my current release cycle, I don't have the time to go fix that. Go talk to product. That's the answer I normally get. I don't know about you, Terry. I'm interested to see what you hear. But having said that, you hit something. You hit the nail on the head. You mentioned. You mentioned prioritization and mentioned something about exploitable. I think we have to be able to get down at the very granular level when it comes to the SBOM and the different libraries, different components that we use, different functions, all the way down to the functions that are used, functions that are not used. And does that make the whole microservice product, whatever it is that you're building, exploitable or not? So I think we have to get to that level. And I think once engineering sees security teams working at that level and trying to dig deep and trying to really help them better prioritize, funnel the hundreds of CVEs to maybe 10, 20, whatever the case, 5 even, then they're willing, from my experience, to step in and start remediating those, because now it's something that's manageable. Whereas before, if we throw hundreds of CVEs at them with a bunch of libraries, they're just going to throw their hands up, as they always have, rightfully so, because they get their marching orders from product and they have to ship code, right? So that's my experience, Terry. I'm interested to hear what you see, what you've seen.
I love that perspective. I'm a very data-driven person. Whenever I join an organization, I take over a security team, what have you, one of the first things I ask is, well, what's important to us? What metrics are we tracking? And I've lost track of the number of times I've joined an organization and the security team says, I ask, are we tracking vulnerabilities in our dependencies? That is, the software we rely on to build our software. And the answer is usually yes. So I'm thankful for that. But almost always, it's an absolute number. So, and it's just a number that just keeps going up, right? Here's the number of dependable alerts we have that haven't been resolved within a certain amount of time. That's great. And that is a number and it does give me some data to work with, but it has no perspective about risk. If there's 800 dependable alerts, which ones are the most important? If I could only fix one right now, where do I start? And I think that's the piece where we haven't had the tools sometimes to, push button, get high impact work to do. And the reality is most security teams are, scrappily staffed, let's call it, and are trying to do a lot. And it's not fair to sort of put the onus of building secure products on an AppSec team or an AppSec individual, right? They may have tools at their disposal like SAST and DAST or SCA even, but I come from an infrastructure background more than a development background. When it comes to coding, I'm a strong scripter. So for me, I'm always fascinated by the vulnerabilities that we're starting to see in the CI/CD pipeline, because that's a place where, even if you do a lot of education and you get, developers trained on OWASP top 10 and you run good capture the flag exercises, et cetera, what about your build and release pipelines? If those aren't secure, and we've seen examples just over the past 3 years of at least three major incidents in the CI/CD pipeline. The Circle CI incident, the Argo CD incident, those come to mind immediately. Is that really the way we're thinking about AppSec, or we've traditionally thought about application security? I don't think so. And it falls in this weird sort of middle ground, right? It's not quite cloud security. It's not quite application security. And it requires a holistic perspective. And again, I don't think we've had that forcing function that says, look, every person on your team may be doing the absolute best job they can, and you still may not produce secure software. So how do we look at from end to end?
Oh, totally. Guys, when I think about risk, I find that thinking about only about vulnerabilities, and I totally agree with everything that you said about vulnerability, like we need better prioritization and we need to get rid of the false positives and we need to reduce the attack surface in the product that we develop. But it is really like as a part, and even a small part of the problem. Like it's not very small, but it's not the majority of the problem. Because if I look at the biggest software supply chain, not all the biggest, but the majority of software supply chains attacks, the vulnerabilities were not the major thing there. Okay, like if an attacker gets into your development environment, they don't care for vulnerabilities anymore, right? They can do whatever they want. Yeah. They can just look at your process, analyze it, understand where it would be most cost effective to put their code, to change the code, to do something. And no vulnerability scanner will provide you any type of defense from this. So, and I think, Terry, we talked about it once. I like to look at a software factory like a real factory. Maybe because my BSc was industrial engineering, right? So it's like was about industries. So in a food factory, for example, let's take a restaurant as an example for a food factory. There is the food itself, right? There are the raw materials, which in software is maybe the open source components. And then there is the final artifact, which is the food that the waitress serves you. And of course, you want to understand what is it in your food. And this is like the SBOM. The bill of materials of the food is like the bill of materials of the software. You want to know if it's healthy, if it contains poison or whatever. But then it's only part of the story, because there is the kitchen. Where did they cook the food? What about the pans? What about the pots? What about the plates? What about the knife and the fork? What about the refrigerator? What about the oven, the stove? Okay, and then there are the processes. Did the cook wash her hands before touching your food, right? Did the health inspector did his inspection in the right time before the food was served for you? And this would be maybe the scanners, right? The SAS, the DAS, etc. So in order to really understand the risk in your software, even if you did everything right with vulnerabilities, it is not enough. Terry, I think you're 100% right that the CI/CD is important, okay? Because I can change the code by changing the configuration file of your Jenkins, right? Or doing something in the SCM. And I can just bypass your SAST inspection by pushing a last-minute commit just before, a second before the code goes to production. So like there is a lot to digest here risk-wise, and looking only through the lens of vulnerabilities is I think is not sufficient.
Mm.
What is your take on it?
Well, I'll touch on the three CI/CD issues that I called out from major vendors over the past 3 years. These aren't fancy attacks, right? Sometimes we get a little caught up in the CISO community about having the latest tools and things like that. But I don't know about you. I read the Verizon data breach incident report every single year.
Yeah.
Every single year, the top two things I see are real breaches that always in the attack chain is either or both phishing and misconfiguration. That's it. Every single time, right? And these three major incidents I talked about in the CI/CD pipeline, it's not hackers hammering you from the outside. Someone clicked on a phishing link and they lost their credentials, and then that just privilege escalation from there. Or someone, made an easy misconfiguration, fat finger mistake, and uploaded something to the wrong place, or set a permission the wrong way, or something like that. These are the pieces where I think, no matter how many tools we buy, no matter how much we focus laser-like on the critical vulnerabilities, the harsh reality of being a defender instead of an attacker is that we have to get 100 things right all the time, every time. And an attacker only needs one thing to go wrong once. And it's, if you don't have that sort of education, you don't have that tone from the top and the support from engineering leadership, and I love that Al called out product leadership, incredibly important, because who among us in the product community is not trying to sell secure products these days, right? Security is now table stakes, and we need to be able to deliver, but we haven't really made that commitment. And I don't think it is just buying one more tool or finding a way to winnow down that large pool of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. I honestly, I try very hard to differentiate between CVEs, vulnerabilities, and risk, and then how does that impact the entire pipeline. I look at the pipeline as a watering hole, right? It's where everybody comes in and congregates, and things come together, and a lot of times beautiful things happen, and sometimes not so beautiful things. I look at it using analogies. I look at it, when you watch the safari videos, right? You have a pool of water, right, and you have all the beautiful animals, the deers and whatever the case, right? Impalas coming and drinking, and then you're like, oh, that's so nice, and all of a sudden you see this alligator come out of the water and chomp, right? So yeah, nefarious bad things can happen. So I think, I totally agree. We do need a more holistic view of the pipeline. We do need integrity checks. We do need immutability, ability to do all that. But at the end of the day, like Terry, you mentioned it too. When you talk to developers and engineers, they're interested in one thing: what do I need to fix, and is that really, really important? And I think it's our job, from a practitioner perspective, from a technology partner perspective, to be able to provide them that ability to do that. Whether they do it or we do it, I personally don't care. If engineering owns that, that's totally fine. I'm more interested in the outcomes versus who owns what process. As long as we're involved from a governance and oversight perspective, because we're ultimately accountable for security. As I've been seen in the industry, what's been happening with SolarWinds situation. So having said that, I know we're going to talk about it, a little bit about it here more, but I'm really interested in challenging our technology partners and coming up with a mechanism to be able to nail down the risk of these, whether it's a misconfiguration, a CVE within a pipeline, so that we give it appropriate priority. like Terry, like you said, again, we have limited resources. Teams are not growing for the most part. They're either staying, stagnant or shrinking. And so we have to be able to rely on our technology partners more and more.
Yeah, I love that, Al. Risk in my mind is the common language between compliance and security, and it's how you talk to the leadership of the company, the board, et cetera, about where to make investments. And I don't know that we do the best job in the CISO community of focusing on risk. Sometimes we think, oh, that's a GRC thing. We'll let that team take care of it. We'll produce an annual risk assessment to make sure we pass our certifications. And shame on us, because this is the avenue through which we can affect change. And then every so often we don't invest enough, and we do get caught a little flat-footed by a forcing function, right? 20 years ago, Sarbanes-Oxley, out of the blue. Well, if you're not going to regulate yourself, here you go. You're going to have to. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is we haven't invested enough in talking about risk and actually focusing on how to help the company manage and measure risk. So here it comes. Here's the forcing function of compliance with, and maybe it's worthwhile to talk a little bit about how this impacts everyone on this call, right? Because some people may have heard me talk about, SBOMs and the executive order and think, oh, well, I don't do business with the government, so we're fine. We're not impacted. And I think we've seen historically, it does not stop there, right? A large enterprise vendor is going to be doing business with the government. They're going to need to comply very quickly. And I know some enterprises are focusing very heavily this year on achieving SALSA and SSDF compliance and being able to produce those SBOMs. Yeah. But it's going to go down the chain, and their vendors are going to need to comply, and their vendors are going to need to comply. And it's going to go all the way to the open source software. We worry about not just the vulnerabilities in the software, but the licensing model of that software. Yeah. It blows my mind sometimes that we put potential acquisition candidates through M&A through the ringer, and we run like black duck against their code to see where those licenses issues are, but we don't have that same rigor internally. And I think again, this is it's an opportunity, because there's a forcing function, and it's up to us as an industry to come up with a way to solve that problem. So I'm excited, frankly, that we get to talk a little bit more about risk in a tangible way, because I think it's time.
So Terry, let me do this real quick. I'm going to put Ruby in a hot seat a little bit here. So having heard what you just heard, Ruby, from a practitioner operator perspective, you're representing the industry, our technology partners, by the whole security vendor industry, specific to this segment of the market. How do you feel about that? When your prospects, customers ask you things like this, what is your response? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? Without having to talk about specifics about Scribe, but in general, what are your thoughts?
So this is for Terry, not for me.
No, this is for you, Ruby. Sorry, I'm putting you in the hot seat.
Okay, I was sure that you're asking this, Terry. So look, I think that first of all, there is a lot of work to do around risk. Okay, but I think that to gain trust, you need to risk and trust is not the same stuff, and it's not even the flip sides of the same coin. Okay, the way that I look at it is like that. Risk is momentarily, okay, like there is risk now. I manage this risk, tomorrow I have other risk, next week I will have a different risk, I mitigate risk. Trust is something that is built, okay? And if you will do a good job in managing risk, eventually you will gain trust. And if you will do not a good job, like a poor job in managing the risk, you can lose the trust that you've gained in one day, okay? And we've seen examples.
No pun intended, it's a dependency, is what you're saying.
Yes. No, you're right. And I mean, in the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody cares how you got hit. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you got it through the digesting a bad package or malicious repository, or your developer lost his credentials, or have been social engineered, or that you had a vulnerability that somebody took advantage of, maybe a vulnerability in your Jenkins, right? Like, nobody cares. The only thing that people care is whether you've been impacted, they have been impacted because of you, okay? And I think that the modern way to earn trust is to manage your development in a zero trust approach. Okay, usually when we're talking about zero trust, we're talking about authentication and identity, but zero trust it's a concept, right? It means that you don't trust anything and anybody, and you need evidence for everything all the time, and this evidence needs to be unequivocal. And actually, this is why we built Scribe from the beginning, because we found out that with all the plethora of application security tools, obviously it was not enough. So a new concept needs to be thought of. And I think that the concept that maybe the OpenSSF, right, is promoting, like continuous signing of code, not only in the last mile, but throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
And building the risk based on accurate SBOMs all the time. And actually, I think that SBOM of the final artifact is not enough, because what happened during the development of your code? Like, what happened? Do you have a visibility to your build process? Do you know what happened there? And today, the visibility is less than perfect. I think this will be the understatement of the year. So I feel that I talk too much here, but what I would like is to hear your takes on what do you think is the right approach, okay? And it really doesn't have to be anything that Scribe is doing. Like, what is the right approach that can actually solve this unsolved problem? And actually, it is today, it is still unsolved, okay? Unlike other problems in cybersecurity that you know how to solve them, and now it's just a matter of how much effort you put and how much money you have, but there is a solution, okay? With software supply chain, it's not the case, right? So what types of technologies or approaches that you have seen or thought of look interesting for you as the technology building blocks for this?
I'll take a first pass. As I was reading through Salsa, I realized that the three levels concept I found really fascinating.
Yeah.
To take the analogy of a restaurant as the software factory, I'll take it a little further. I am ordering delivery from a restaurant, right? And when that delivery arrives, how do I know? How do I know that it's good? Well, Salsa gives us that mechanism. It has three levels, and it says the first level is you need a receipt. You need an SBOM. You need some way to prove the provenance of like what went into building this software. Is it really the French fries I ordered, or is it something else? And that's great. That's a start, because let's be honest, we can't really do that today as an industry. So I think even if you start there as something to work backwards from and say we need to be able to do this in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, it's a great way to start, because you'll just pull on a thread and you'll find all these places where people realize, oh, I don't know what happens. I sort of pass it over to the other team and it's their problem now. But that's level one. Level two is actually being able to validate. And I think of that like the receipt lists all the ingredients of French fries that I ordered. And that's great, right? That's a step further. That gets us that actual SBOM that as a consumer, I want to validate. It's like, oh, I ordered the organic potatoes, and it says right here, yes, it was certified organic, so and so, blah blah blah. But then the third layer is even more interesting. How do I know that the delivery driver didn't change something? Which it talks about our build systems. Even if everything works perfectly in the restaurant and there's clean pans and clean plates and the cook washed their hands, et cetera, the build and release process is still something that we tend to go like this and ignore in the software, in the product industry specifically. And I think so that's the interesting thing for me about SDLC is it gives you those three levels, and it gives you sort of built-in mechanisms and targets for where do I invest next.
Yeah, I think what you're getting to, Terry, is integrity, immutability of the code, concepts of lineage and provenance. To build on what Ruby mentioned, concept of zero trust, right? You have to build confidence. And I grapple with this for a very long time, concept of gating, right? Gates in the pipeline. As much as I think I've been against it for a very long time, I think it's a necessary thing in this day and age, given the scrutiny and the impact to everything around us. Because I think that's the only way you can do it. Continuous means continuous. I don't know if there is such a thing as 100% continuous real time. So concepts of gates that don't impact the pipeline, the delivery of code in any significant fashion, right? Continue to help reduce friction, right, in the build cycles. I think those are all keys, and I think that's where, again, I go back to challenging our technology partners to be able to provide that to us through their products, through their platforms. Because, like I said before, I tried building this with PKI infrastructure, very smart people. It was very, very difficult. There's no way you could do it on your own at scale, And I've been at SMBs, I've been at mid-market companies, I've been at enterprises, and it doesn't matter where you are, you just can't do it at scale. So that's my take on that. But I like the concept of zero trust. I haven't heard it in the build process, dev cycle. I think with where we're going in terms of the continued remote workforce and ability to access our IDE, right, and be able to do this at scale, I think that's I can see the two kind of from an access perspective and from a build process perspective kind of merging into one. And the concept of zero trust, that is, and just becoming one thing. Not I have zero trust here in terms of access, and I have zero trust here in terms of my build process. I think it's going to converge at some point.
Yeah, well, I want to touch two of the things that you said, Al, and obviously I'm not objective, right? We develop the things that we believe are effective, but I want to touch two of the things that you said because I think they are crucial to really solve a software supply chain problem. The first one is what you touched on, integrity and provenance, and I think that integrity and provenance are mandatory today, okay? Because this is the only way that we have to make sure that what we meant to happen really happened. This is the only way to ensure that the code artifact, the image, the container, whatever we built is what we actually meant to build, and there was nothing inserted in the process. And the only way that you can do it is only if you maintain a chain of custody. And the way to maintain chain of custody is through continuously signing and verifying the integrity of actually everything, the integrity of the code, the integrity of the configuration files of your CI/CD tools that you used, and the integrity of your process. You wanted the code review. Did code review happen to every commit, etc.? You wanted to run a SAST. Was it run? So I think that integrity and provenance, and you touched it, and I totally agree, it's fundamental. And the other thing that you touched is the gateways. And here, I think that the shift left is not enough today. Okay, I talked it with both of you, but I think this is so important to understand, because like Genesis, like at first, developers didn't care at all, and it was all on the CISO, but most of the CISOs don't understand about development, right? Many of them came from other fields, not from development, right? Maybe from IT or straight away from security. So they said, okay, we don't understand development. Who understand development? Developers, right? So take it from me. I move the responsibility for the health of the code, cybersecurity-wise, to the developers. However, developers are not measured on security in most organizations. Even Scribe developers, right? They want to develop code fast with as fewer bugs as possible. So transferring the responsibility to them, first of all, it's important. It needs to be done. However, you should acknowledge that it will not work as well as you think, or in some organizations at all. And you're still accountable. If you're the CISO, you're still accountable. If something bad happens, they will come and point fingers at you, okay? And you will not be able to say, no, it's their fault. I gave them a sneak or whatever, and now it's they need to produce good code. So it's still on you. So what can you do? Okay, you need, yes, shift left is important. You need to provide them the tools to deal with it themselves, especially vulnerabilities when they build the code. But it will not solve the problem, okay, in any level, on any level. So this is why the concept of SDLC guardrails, where you as the CISO determines what are the SDLC policies that your organization needs to meet. It could be based on the benchmark of SALSA or SSDF or any secure SDLC framework that you find meaningful and effective for you. And then here at Scribe, we are using policy as code in order to give a form to every SDLC policy that you can think of, and then implement it directly into the CI/CD pipelines. So even if your developers are careless or clueless or malicious or whatever they are, or great people, but I mean, they can do whatever they can do because they need to, they have a deadline, then you're still protected. You have these guardrails, and if the code does not meet your standards, the security team standards, it will just it will not happen. And actually, we found out that it increased the dev speed, okay? Because if you find the problems later, then it will take you, you'll need a recall, and you'll need a lot of terrible stuff that impact the business. And if you stop it in the admission controller or at any gate that you put, as you said it, L, then okay, there is a problem. Let's deal with it now before it's in the production.
And actually, I love the fact that the NIST SSDF calls this out. It says, just producing good software is not enough, right? You have to, what is it? Prepare the organization is one of the 4 pillars. And so I'll ask you, Al, you know, we say as CISOs quite often, hey, we really need to educate our developers. We need to make sure that they take a certain training around data handling or et cetera. It does always feel a little bit like we're chasing after the main flow of a business. And I don't know about you, but it's been rare in organizations that I've done my good work to come up with interesting training for developers, which usually has to be interactive. It has to be technical. You know, you've got to do capture the flag exercises, not click through a recording kind of training. And I don't know that I've been successful. Do you think this is sort of a tipping point where we're going to see increased partnership? Because everything that Ruby said resonates with me, but I feel like I will never be successful unless I have engineering and product on my side. So what do we do? Is it training? What are we missing here that we haven't successfully achieved to really improve software quality?
I think it comes down to accountability. We hit on it a couple of times. You know, the one thing I do wherever I go in any organization that's building products, shipping products, nowadays specifically SaaS, is treating these issues as quality issues. And if you're savvy enough to articulate that to product and engineering, it's very hard to deny that, to refute that. So when you do that, it kind of sets the tone. This is your responsibility. Although I'm still accountable for the security of the company, you're responsible. And we all have to be responsible, and we all have to do our part. And we all have to be able to address these and be able to measure how well we address these.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing is measuring. So really setting the tone in terms of accountability, responsibility, and accountability, and then the ability to measure, and then curate training for those specific issues that they keep producing and reproducing. So if you have a process where you're detecting defects, CVs that are bypassing the remediation cycles, et cetera, if you can take those and tie it back to the developer or developers or the pod that's producing those over time, and you can create metrics around that, and you can see who's repeat offenders, not be punitive by any means, but curate training specific training specifically for them, and then continue to measure that cycle, right? You'll start to see the needle moving slowly. Because now when you have metrics, right, the engineering managers are looking at it, right, the CTO is looking at it, and then all this propagates up to leadership and the board at some point, not from a CVE, from a defect perspective, but from a risk perspective, right? And so when you could gamify that and look at this product line from, versus this product line, then the whole, importance kind of shifts in terms of, oh crap, I got to do better. So I think it's crawl, walk, run, right? Baby steps. You can't just go and say, okay, you got to fix these and you're going to measure you, and then you got to go take this web-based training. They don't want to do that. They want training specific to them. And they can't deny if they're producing vulnerabilities, the same class of vulnerabilities all the time, they're not going to deny that, right? It's right there. It's black and white. And all you're doing is trying to help them, right? Not produce those same issues. So that's the approach that I've taken. And, it helps, definitely helps when the culture is there. But even if the culture is not there, when you start educating from top down and bottom up, I think things converge at the end. It takes some time. I've seen it take anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years. But man, at the end, it's well worth it to see that kind of come together and work.
I love that answer, especially about accountability. I wanted to add something, but before I do, by the way, for our audience, we are taking questions. If you want to throw your questions in the chat, we'll have a few minutes to address those. But to riff on something you said about accountability, I think that's incredibly important. But I think we've lacked one tool in our tool belt, which is we've been pushing internally on improving software quality. And just like you, I use that same mechanism all the time. I try not to frame things as security problems or compliance requirements or things like that. We talk about software quality. We talk about the health of our systems. We talk about the cost of taking good actions up front versus the cost of responding to incidents and outages, which helps change things. But I feel like we've lacked sort of a backstop against which to drive that accountability. But here it comes. If you have to produce an SBOM for your products and a certain team is consistently, having quality issues in their software process, we won't be able to produce the SBOM. And that, believe me, it becomes a business problem. It doesn't become an engineering problem.
Yes, that resonates. Oh my God. You just reminded me, being in the fintech space, real estate tech fintech space, I've seen not just the request for SBOMs and MSAs, but also actual list of vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. Not in an annual assessment or an audit or questionnaire, but in the actual MSA with large financial institutions. So if you're in fintech, if you're in finance, healthcare, anything where that's tightly aligned with government and the NIST frameworks and standards, if you haven't seen them already, you're going to start seeing them pretty soon. You're going to have to generate your SBOM. You're going to have to generate your list of CVEs. Not only are you going to do that, you're going to have to tell them, how are you going to fix it? When are you going to fix it? And they're going to track that, they being your customers. So yeah, you're exactly right. It becomes a business issue. And, I hate to, I want everybody to do the right thing for the right reason. I only use that kind of as a hammer at the end instead of compliance, because compliance is, it's been here for a while and it hasn't really worked. It's just a mechanism of validating security in my mind. But when it becomes a business issue and the CRO is involved, then it's a game changer. So yeah, you're right.
I resonate so much. And I think the reason is that the root, like the foundation layer of doing business is trust. If there is no trust, there is no business. Okay, if you cannot trust the product that you get from your vendor, you will not do business with him. Okay, it's pretty simple. So trust in product, trust in software becomes a business issue. It was always a business issue, but now it's acute enough to be a business enabler. Okay, and I think, gentlemen, that you hammered it right on the head. I mean, that's it. This is exactly what it is. All right, I see that we are closing the hour, so I let you gentlemen to say like your if you have like one recommendation or one thing you want to say to the world to summarize what you think. This is the time.
I would say get in front of this, be proactive before you're forced to be reactive. It's not fun. Try to go figure out how to produce an SBOM on your list of CVEs and have to answer to your customers in terms of integrity of your software, whether you're SaaS or shipping products on-prem, doesn't matter. Get in front of it now.
I think that plus one. And, I think there's a real opportunity for us as CISOs and security practitioners to bring the perspective of the customer into these conversations, right? We sometimes can have a very internal focus on good processes and et cetera. And that is very important. And as Al said, we want to do the right thing for the right reasons, but also we have these requirements and they're usually customer driven. And if you're not a direct customer, for example, of the government immediately, you're downstream, I guarantee, from one or more of the big players in the Fortune 100 who are, and they're going to provide that forcing function. And you don't want to be caught flat-footed. You don't want to have to suddenly have a contract renewal and see in it, must deliver SBOM for every release. The investment we have to make as an industry is significant, but the outcomes can be pretty amazing as well. So I think we all need to sort of use that customer perspective and say, what is it our customers expect from us? How do we deliver that? And how do we gain from it internally as well?
Your comments were the perfect summary for this hour, really. I totally resonate with both of you. And I want to thank you for being here. It's been a full hour now. And I knew it will be a lot of fun, and it was a tremendous fun. I enjoyed it. It was a pleasure. And to the audience, to the people who came and made this time, I want to thank you for being with us. It's been great. And if you want to know more, if something is interesting for you from all the stuff that we've talked about here, I think that the best thing that I can recommend is to recommend you to our website because we really wrote a lot of materials about many of the stuff that we've talked here. And there are many references to other sources as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Terry. And I hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you both. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Bye.
Have a great day.